I never thought I'd admit this out loud, but something came into my room that night. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. The darkness pressed against the corners, heavier than usual, and every small creak of the house felt like a footstep inching closer. At first, I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, that maybe a loose floorboard was shifting or the wind rattling the windows. But then I heard it, a faint, dragging sound across the carpet, deliberate and slow, like someone or something was pacing just beyond the reach of the dim light. I froze. My body refused to move, yet my mind screamed at me to run. The air grew colder, and the hairs on my arms and neck stood rigid, as if invisible fingers were grazing my skin. Then came the whispering. At first, it was just static in my ears, an indecipherable murmur that made my stomach twist. And then it sharpened into a voice, low, guttural, and impossibly intimate. It said my name, and not in the way someone would casually call you across a room. It wasn't playful or teasing. It was deliberate, hungry, like it had been waiting for me, studying me, learning me. My rational mind scrambled for an explanation. A prank, sleep deprivation, some trick of acoustics. But I knew that what was in that room with me wasn't human. I tried to move, tried to scream, but nothing worked. It lingered just out of sight, a presence that warped the shadows and whispered secrets I wasn't meant to know. And the thing whispered my name, but I don't know how it knew it. People think demons are rare, that they're confined to stories, myths, or movies designed to scare kids. But I can tell you, they are real. And encounters like mine happen far more often than anyone admits. Every ordinary night carries the potential for something, watching, waiting, and learning. And sometimes, just sometimes, it reaches out and you can't turn away. I've spent years collecting stories like the one I just told you, accounts from people scattered across the globe, people who thought they were alone, who thought no one would ever believe them. Some of these stories were almost too real to share, too close to the edge of reason, too vivid to dismiss. And yet, I've seen patterns emerge, shadows overlapping across continents, encounters that share the same impossible details, the same whispers in the dark. Over the course of the series, I'm going to take you through 10 true demon encounters. Each one escalates in intensity, each one more unsettling than the last. Some are brief, almost subtle, lingering moments of dread. Others are all-consuming, warping the very fabric of reality around those who experience them. By the time we reach the final story, you may find yourself questioning everything you thought you knew about the world and the things that lurk just beyond the veil of normal life. If you've ever felt the hairs on your neck prickle for no reason, or heard a sound that made your blood run cold, you might recognize something in these stories. And if you've never experienced anything like that, well, you might still pick up on the secrets that these encounters reveal. Things most people will never understand. Patterns too unsettling to be coincidences. Will move carefully, story by story. Some will make you doubt your senses. Some will make you sleep with the lights on. And all of them carry a warning. The danger often begins small. The first story I'm about to share might seem almost laughable at first glance. A minor, unremarkable event in an ordinary home. But that's precisely where the danger starts. Because what begins as a flicker in the corner of your eye, a faint whisper in an empty room, can grow into something that refuses to leave, something that watches, waits, and knows. Story 1. The Whisper in the Dark. It started on a Tuesday night, the kind of ordinary night where I should have been drifting off to sleep without a second thought. My room was quiet, my apartment bathed in the soft glow of the street lights outside, and everything seemed normal. That's why it hit me so hard. The whisper, at first it was faint, almost like the wind brushing against the window. I rolled over, thinking it was just my imagination. But then the whisper grew clearer, deliberate, curling around my ears with words I couldn't fully understand. "You're awake," it breathed. "You see me." My heart hammered in my chest as I scanned the shadows, trying to find the source. But nothing was there. I told myself it was silly. Maybe a trick of the mind. Fatigue playing cruel games. Yet, over the next hour, the whispers persisted, growing bolder. A shape would flicker at the edge of my vision, a shadow where none should be. I blinked and it vanished. Then it appeared closer and closer, a faint silhouette, human in outline but warped, wrong. I whispered back, just to test myself, though my voice trembled. "Who's there?" The reply came instantly, soft but filled with a strange familiarity. "I've always been here." My stomach turned. Every rational thought screamed at me to leave the room, to run. But my body was frozen, trapped in terror and fascination. By morning, the whispers had stopped. The apparitions were gone. Or so I thought. I opened my eyes to sunlight spilling through the curtains and froze. On my dresser, an object sat that I had never placed there. A small black stone, smooth and cold as if it had been watching me sleep. And I knew, deep down, This was only the beginning. And then I thought I was safe. I wasn't. Story 2. The Neighbor's Shadow. I had always thought my neighborhood was safe. Quiet streets, polite greetings, children playing in yards. Ordinary, mundane life. Until I noticed him. My neighbor, Mr. Langley, had a habit of standing in his doorway at odd hours, just watching. At first, I thought it was harmless. Maybe he was lonely, or maybe he had a strange sense of routine. But then, the shadow followed me. I remember one evening, walking home from the grocery store, when I heard a low, rasping whisper. "You can't hide." I looked up and saw him, or at least what looked like him, leaning from his doorway. His eyes, though, weren't human. Dark, endless, and hollow. They seemed to pierce through me, through the walls, through reality itself. I froze, fumbling for my keys. I don't know what you mean," I stammered. He, or it, smiled. "I'm always closer than you think." Days later, small things began to unsettle me. Doors left slightly ajar. Faint footsteps in the hall when I was alone. Glimpses of a tall, thin figure reflected in mirrors, disappearing when I turned. Friends laughed when I told them. "It's probably just your imagination," they said. But the truth gnawed at me. This wasn't imagination. It was deliberate, calculating. One night, I confronted him. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded. The shadow shifted, stretched unnaturally across the wall. "Because you watch too," it hissed. And just like that, it vanished into the darkness, leaving only the lingering sense that someone or something had crossed the threshold of ordinary life into mine. That's when I realized the terrifying truth. Demons don't just lurk in abandoned houses or dark forests. Sometimes they slip quietly into the most familiar spaces, hiding behind polite faces, creeping into trust, and once they're in, they follow. They observe, they escalate. After that night, I could never look at my neighbors the same way again. Story 3. The Possessed Journal. I found the journal tucked away in a forgotten corner of the thrift store. Its leather cover cracked, pages yellowed with age. It seemed innocent at first. Just a diary, a collection of mundane thoughts. But as I flipped through the pages, I realized I was holding something far darker. The entries began normally. Complaints about school, notes on daily routines, harmless musings. Then, one night, the writing changed. It was no longer consistent, no longer human words appeared between the lines. Small, precise, almost carved into the paper. "I see you. I am here. I blinked. Sure, I had imagined it, but the next page made my stomach twist. You will pick this up. You will read what I write, and you will listen. My heart bounded. I read further, as if compelled by some invisible force. The journal chronicled events that had already happened in my life, details I had never written down, things I had never shared. And then came the most horrifying part. Predictions. Small things at first. Rain on Tuesday. A phone call from a friend. Then, darker events. Arguments. Accidents. The kind of details no one could know unless they were inside my life. And then I found it. My own handwriting, unmistakable, smeared on the page like ink bleeding from the future. Tonight, I will see it. It is waiting for me in the dark. My hand shook as I closed the journal. I hadn't written that. Not yet. The whisper started almost immediately after. Faint at first, then louder, like the journal had awakened something, a presence that wasn't content to simply observe. It wanted participation. It wanted me. Some demons don't just visit you. Some demons write themselves into your life, inscribing their will onto paper, into memory, into your very actions. And the more you read, the more you realize you're not just an observer, you're part of the story. I couldn't put it down, and deep down I knew I shouldn't. Story 4. The reflection that watched me. It started with the lights flickering in the bathroom. I thought it was just an old bulb dying. The kind of thing you shrug off and plan to replace later. But that night, as I stepped toward the mirror, something felt off. The air felt charged, heavy, as if the room itself was holding its breath. I reached for the faucet, watching my reflection move in perfect sync. Until it didn't. I froze. My hand hovered over the water, but in the mirror, my reflection's fingers were already resting on the handle. I blinked hard, thinking I was imagining things. But when I leaned closer to inspect the glass, the reflection leaned slower, too slow, deliberately slow. A chill crawled down my spine. I lifted my hand again. This time, the reflection hesitated before following, its head tilting slightly, almost studying me. The lights flickered again, plunging the room into brief darkness. And in that split second, I felt something shift behind the glass, like a presence adjusting itself, preparing. When the light steadied, the reflection was already looking straight into my eyes, unblinking. Its expression wasn't fear or confusion. It was curiosity, as if it had finally noticed me noticing it. My breath trembled as I whispered, "What do you want?" The reflection's lips didn't move. It simply watched, its eyes widening a fraction too much. The longer I stood there, the more wrong it felt. Like the reflection wasn't copying me anymore, but waiting for me to copy it. I slowly stepped back. My reflection didn't. It stayed close to the glass, its face inching forward, its eyes darkening, as though some shadow had seeped through its pupils. And then, without warning, it smiled. I didn't. That smile stretched too wide, too knowing. The edges of its mouth pulling up just a little too far. I stumbled out of the bathroom, slamming the door behind me, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. After that night, I avoided mirrors entirely. But some things follow you regardless. Story 5. The Attic Visitor. It started as a creak above my head. I had lived in the house for years, and the attic was usually silent, filled only with dust and old boxes. But that night, something moved up there. Slow, deliberate, heavy steps that didn't belong to the house. Settling. My chest tightened as I climbed the narrow staircase, every fiber of my being screaming at me to stop. "Hello," I called, my voice trembling more than I wanted to admit. Silence. Then a soft, mocking chuckle drifted down from the shadows. My eyes strained to see in the dim light, and that's when I felt it. A weight in the air, a presence that pushed down on me like I was nothing more than a toy. "You shouldn't have come up here," it hissed. Voice low and guttural, echoing in the rafters. I froze. I could see nothing, yet I knew it was there, watching, waiting. My hands shook as I reached for the light switch, the bulb flickering but failing to illuminate the corners of the attic. Then I saw it. A figure, tall, impossibly thin, moving just beyond the reach of the weak glow. Its eyes glowed faintly red, and every instinct I had told me to run. But my legs refused to obey. "Go away," I whispered, barely audible. The figure tilted its head, studying me as if amused. A sudden crash echoed behind me, and I stumbled, heart hammering in my throat. The thing lunged, and I felt the air shift, a cold pressure brushing my skin. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. Disappeared into the darkness as though it had never existed. I heard the front door creak open. My neighbor, alerted by the sounds, was calling my name. Relief should have washed over me, but it didn't. The attic was silent again, seemingly empty. But the lingering dread told me otherwise. I knew, without a doubt, it had been real. And more importantly, I knew it wasn't gone. Not really. It's when the demon follows you home that the real terror begins. And the question that haunted me most that night lingered. What if it comes back when you think you're safe? Story 6. The phone call from hell. It started with a simple notification, a missed call from a number I didn't recognize. I shrugged it off. Probably a wrong number, but then the texts began. Short messages at first. I see you. Don't turn round. My heart thudded as I checked the logs. The numbers changed every time, untraceable, impossible to block. I tried to ignore it, thinking maybe it was a prank. But the interruptions became relentless. My phone rang at night when no one could be calling. The ringtone, distorted, warped, echoed through the apartment like a scream. I answered once, nothing. Just static. Then a faint whisper of my name, drawn out, deliberate, almost delighted. You can't hide, the voice breathed through the speaker one night. Not in the shadows, not in your dreams. Every step I took, every room I entered, it seemed the phone was already there, waiting. Sometimes the screen would light up by itself, displaying pictures I hadn't taken, showing angles of my apartment I'd never thought to photograph. It knew me. It was inside my routines, inside my life, and no amount of shutting it off, tossing it across the room, or switching numbers made it stop. The final call came at 3 in the morning. My hands were trembling as I stared at the screen. No number, no name, just the phone, alive with an eerie glow. I wanted to ignore it, to pretend it wasn't happening. But curiosity, or maybe fear, made me swipe to answer. Silence. And then breathing. Deep, wet, deliberate. I dropped the phone. The call ended, but the sense of it remained, filling the apartment like a shadow that didn't belong. You can't hide from it, not in your home, not through screens, not when it knows your every move. If you thought a call could haunt you, some demons can do much worse. Story 7. The Ritual in the Woods. I didn't plan to go into the woods that night. The fog hung thick between the trees, swallowing the moonlight, and every snapping branch under my feet felt amplified, like the forest itself was listening. But curiosity, foolish, dangerous curiosity, drove me deeper. That's when I found it. A clearing, illuminated by flickering candles, arranged in a pattern I didn't recognize. Symbols carved into the earth glowed faintly in the firelight, black and wet, as though the ground itself had bled. I froze, hiding behind a gnarled tree. Watching shadows moved around the circle, figures cloaked, chanting in a language that made my skin crawl. The air pulsed with something alive, something aware, and then I heard it. The low, guttural resonance of a voice I couldn't place. The ritual wasn't for prayer or celebration. It was for summoning. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But something rooted me in place. A mix of fear and awe that I couldn't break. The chanting rose, a crescendo of words that seemed to scrape at the edges of my mind, twisting and pulling at my thoughts. Then the air shifted, the temperature plummeted. I felt it before I saw it. A presence, towering, unseen, aware of me. My breath hitched. The wind carried a whisper, soft but precise. I know your name. My heart stuttered. I hadn't spoken it aloud, not once. Yet the shadow seemed to lean closer, drawn toward me, aware that I had witnessed what should never be seen. I stumbled backward, the forest spinning, the ritualist's eyes never leaving the circle, never noticing me. Yet I knew I was marked. Some rituals shouldn't be witnessed. Some knowledge isn't meant for the living. Yet here I was, standing on the edge of something ancient, something hungry, something that had just learned my name. And that's when I understood. Some demons don't wait for you to stumble upon them. They come hunting. Story 8. The shadow in the hospital. Hospitals are supposed to be safe, sterile, clinical, full of light and order. But late that night, the place felt wrong. I was visiting a friend recovering from surgery when I first noticed it. A shadow flitting just beyond the edge of the hall, always in peripheral vision, gone when I looked directly. At first, I chalked it up to exhaustion. The fluorescent lights playing tricks on my eyes. Then came the sounds, faint whispers echoing through empty corridors, beds rattling for no reason, monitors beeping softly as if warning me, or maybe calling me closer. My friend slept fitfully, murmuring unintelligible words in his dreams. But whenever I leaned in to check on him, the shadow drew closer, almost protective, almost predatory. "Did you see that?" I asked a nurse passing by. She smiled politely, distracted. "You're just tired. Go rest." But I knew it wasn't my imagination. It lingered in the corners, moving silently, studying, waiting for the right moment. I tried to convince myself it wasn't real, that hospitals couldn't be haunted like the old houses in the stories. By the third hour, panic set in. Equipment would flicker, doors creaked shut behind me, and the feeling of being watched grew unbearable. And then it happened. My friend's bed was empty, gone. No notes, no explanation, no trace. When I ran to staff, they shook their heads. "He's fine. He never left the room." But I knew what I had seen. I knew the shadow had taken him, vanished him into some place that wasn't ours. Sometimes the people you trust are blind. Sometimes so is everyone else. And sometimes the danger doesn't announce itself. It waits, patient and invisible, ready to strike when you least expect it. By now, you might think it's all over, but it's only getting worse. Story 9. The dream that was real. It began with a dream, or what I thought was a dream. I was walking through my old neighborhood. Familiar streets bathed in golden light. Everything seemed normal until the shadows stretched too long. The air grew too cold and whispers threaded through the breeze. I shrugged it off at first until I woke, and the marks on my hands, the mud on my shoes, the cold chill lingering in the room proved I hadn't been asleep so at all. Night after night, it continued. I would fall into sleep, and the demon would appear, always watching, always speaking in that low, daunting voice. "You can't leave," it would say. And when I woke, traces of the dream remained. A misplaced object, a lingering scent of smoke, the unmistakable feeling of being touched. Reality and slumber blended until I could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. I tried to fight it, to avoid sleep, to distract myself with light and noise. But exhaustion has a way of bending willpower, and eventually I would succumb. Each night, the same creeping dread, the same whispered threats, until I started to wonder if waking life was just another layer of the nightmare. One morning, I opened my eyes and saw it standing at the foot of my bed. Clear, real, impossibly solid. It smiled, and I could swear that even then it whispered, "Was I ever asleep?" The fear wasn't just in the night. It had seeped into my every moment. My own life felt borrowed, fragile, unreliable. Every shadow, every creak, every flicker of movement made me question if I was truly awake or still trapped within its design. Some demons don't just visit you in the dark. Some enter your mind, your sleep, your very perception of reality. And some demons don't stop at dreams. Story 10. The house that ate time. I thought I knew fear. I thought I had seen the worst until I stepped into that house. It was supposed to be a weekend getaway with friends. A cozy cabin on the outskirts of town. Remote, quiet, perfect. The first night was normal enough. Laughter, the smell of wood smoke, the warmth of firelight. But the second night, the walls began to breathe. At first, it was subtle. The clock ticked too slowly. Shadows lingered too long. Doors I had just closed were ajar. Hallways stretched farther than they should have, and whispers threaded through the floorboards like the house itself was alive, listening. I called for my friends, but their voices came from the wrong direction. I rounded corners, only to find empty rooms. The laughter of the first night had twisted into something hollow, mocking, impossibly distant. I think something's wrong, one friend said, voice shaking. The floor shifted beneath us, groaning like old bones. Another laughed nervously, but I could see the fear in their eyes. The house was feeding on it, twisting our perceptions, bending time. Minutes stretched into hours. Hours collapsed into seconds, and we couldn't tell if we were moving forward or if the house had swallowed the world outside entirely. I tried to leave. I ran from room to room, corridors folding impossibly, ceilings stretching high above, shadows pooling in corners. I called names, but no one answered. Or maybe they did. I couldn't tell if the voices were real or echoes, tricks to lure me deeper. A door slammed shut behind me. The air thickened, almost solid, pressing against my chest. A low voice, familiar, yet alien, whispered, "You're here, and here, and nowhere." By dawn, I emerged. Or so I thought. The forest outside looked wrong, twisted. My friends were gone, vanished without a trace. And though I escaped the immediate terror, the house had left its mark. Time still stuttered around me. Shadows lingered too long. Every reflective surface seemed to stretch space, bend reality. And I couldn't shake the feeling that the house, or what had lived inside it, was still with me. I survived. Barely. But survival doesn't always mean freedom. I can feel it in every corner, in every stretch of silence, in the moments between heartbeat and breath. The house, or the thing that devours time, has a way of lingering, waiting for the next chance, the next visitor, the next story to consume. What would you do if you stepped inside and reality itself refused to let you leave? We've walked together through 10 stories, 10 glimpses into the dark corners of reality, where the ordinary twists into the unthinkable. Each encounter was different, some subtle, almost dismissible, others raw and violent. But if there's one truth that ties them all together, it's this: demons, in whatever form they take, are unpredictable. They don't follow rules, and they rarely show themselves in the ways you expect. They are patient, observing, and sometimes they wait lifetimes for the right moment. Think back on the stories we've shared, the whispers in the dark, shadows that shouldn't exist, journals that write themselves, mirrors that watch, calls that never end. Even the most mundane moments were corrupted, tainted by the presence of something unseen. These aren't just tales meant to scare you. They are patterns, clues, warnings, and if you look closely, you might start to notice them in your own life, in the quiet spaces between your daily routines, in the flicker of movement you dismiss as nothing. It's tempting to close this video and tell yourself it's over, that the danger is behind us. But the truth is far more unsettling. Even after these stories, some of them are still out there, watching, waiting, learning. And some of the experiences, the ones we couldn't fully capture or explain, will remain mysteries, secrets that only those brave enough to observe, question, and discuss might ever hope to uncover. I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt watched, whispered to, or encountered something that defied explanation? Share your experiences in the comments. Discuss them with others. You might find someone else who has seen the same patterns, the same subtle signals that point towards something greater, something lurking just beyond our perception. These stories are more than entertainment. They are part of a shared experience, a map for those willing to pay attention. As you leave this video, keep your senses sharp. Notice the shadows that linger a little too long, the reflections that don't quite match, the whispers that fade just as you turn your head. Remember that what we've explored together tonight is only a fraction of what exists. And sometimes, when the lights go out, when the world seems still, you may feel it, the gaze of something watching, knowing, waiting. The stories end here, but the danger does not. And if you think you're safe, well, you might already be on its radar, because the last thing you'll ever hear, if it chooses to speak, is your own name whispered from the dark.